Hi everyone, welcome. Ren City here. Another recap of the NBA. This is 15 weeks now. Holy, 15 weeks in the NBA season now. Talking nothing but NBA here. A little different than my regular podcast, Sports and Shorts and Sorts. When I talk about the entirety of sports, from football, footy, college hoops, and wrap it up with a nice story. This is just NBA. Nothing but NBA. Strictly hoops talk. If you're a hoop head, hopefully this is for you. Hope you enjoy it. Now, I usually start by jumping into a division, breaking down the teams, top to bottom, based on the past week. We had some trade deadline coming on, though. Excuse me, and there wasn't a movement of huge stars, but there were some pieces moved that may get that team over the hump. And there were some moves that may set teams up for next year pretty well. And then there were some teams that we thought would make moves, but they stood still and they're sticking with their guys the rest of the season. So before I do the usual recap of the teams that played over the past week, let's go over a few of these trades that went down. It all kind of got kicked off the day prior with the Pistons acquiring Simone Fontecchio from the Utah Jazz. Pistons sent Kevin Knox, a 2024 second round pick, and the rights to 2022 second rounder Gabriel Procida. Celtics picked up some front court depth, acquiring Xavier Tillman from the Memphis Grizzlies. Grizzlies received Lamar Stevens and two second round picks, one in 2027, one in 2030. Minnesota Timberwolves picked up some veteran backcourt leadership, picking up Monte Morris from the Pistons. Nice little backup guard there. Pistons got back Shake Milton, Troy Brown Jr., and a 2030 pick. And there's a move that took a little bit more time to kind of see what all pieces were involved. But Buddy Hield, you heard he'd get moved, and he did get moved. It ended up being a three-team trade. Buddy Hield sent from Indiana to Philadelphia to the 76ers. Yes, the Pacers received Furkan Korkmaz, Doug McDermott via the Spurs, a 2024 second round pick, a 2029 second round pick in cash. The Spurs received Marcus Morris, a second round pick in cash. And the Pacers decided to keep one of the shooters. They kept Dougie McBuckets and waiving Korkmaz. I hope the team picks him up. I liked how the Turkish guy played, and he requested a trade out of Philly back in 2018. So it's been years of him demanding a trade, and he finally got his wish. And an interesting move to trade within, a potential playoff opponent. But the Sixers, they get a good shooter in Buddy Hield, and the Pacers replace that shooter with a different type of shooter in Dougie McBuckets. And I don't know if Morris will stay in San Antonio or will get waived. We'll see. 76ers didn't stop there. They sent Daniel House to and a 2024 second round pick to the Pistons for a 2028 second round pick. It was basically a salary dump, and House was waived by the Pistons right after. And the Sixers surprised us again, trading with another Eastern Conference rival. This time the Sixers sent Patrick Beverley to the Milwaukee Bucks for Cameron Payne and a 2027 second round pick. Doc Rivers has some familiarity with Pat Bev, and his defensive toughness is just what the Bucks need right now. There is some bad blood between Damian Lillard and Pat Bev, so we'll see if they can put that aside for the better of the team. There's already talks that, they're putting it aside. It's all about a championship, but let's see what happens there. Toronto Raptors got involved in the action, trading with the Utah Jazz. Raptors bringing another Canadian home, acquiring Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji. The Jazz received Otto Porter Jr., Kira Lewis Jr., and a 2024 first round pick. Raptors didn't stop there. They sent Dennis Schroeder and Thaddeus Young to the Brooklyn Nets for Spencer Dinwiddie. I thought Dinwiddie was a pretty good fit for the Raps, but he was waived right after being acquired, so we'll see where he goes. Staying in the Atlantic, the Knicks made another move, and I really like this one. They picked up Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic from the Detroit Pistons. So, and the Pistons received Evan Fournier, Malachi Flynn, Quentin Grimes, Ryan Arcidiacono. I always mess his name up. Two future second round picks in cash. You might say that was a lot for those guys, but those guys, Burks and Bogdanovic, vets that can put the ball in the basket, and they're role players. They don't demand it all the time. Great pickups. Grimes was getting time here and there with the Knicks, but the rest of those guys traded were not really playing at all. Great move for the Knicks, perhaps the best of the day. And the Pistons with everything they were getting back in that huge haul, they had to make room, and they seemed to find room for everybody but Killian Hayes. The former number 7 overall pick was waived by the Pistons. Yeah, he wanted to change the scenery, and they gave the 22-year-old a change of scenery. They cut him. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, he's 22, a lot of promise yet. We'll see who picks him up. And Joe Harris, sharpshooter with the Pistons, was also let go there. In the Western Conference, there was some action going on. The Oklahoma City Thunder added some veteran leadership to their young squad, acquiring former All-Star Gordon Hayward from the Hornets. The Hornets received Trey Mann, Vasily Micic, Davis Bertans, a 2024 second-round pick and a 2025 second-round pick, and cash. Thunder needed a vet, and they got one that can be a pretty decent scorer in the league. I said he was an all-star, but that's 7 years ago, 2017, and his scoring has dropped each of the last seasons in Charlotte. He's had issues staying on the floor with injuries, but if he can come in and show these youngsters how to vet it up, and if he could look more like the Utah Jazz Gordon Hayward, this will be a great move. But I feel the Thunder would have been better off getting one of those other dudes the Knicks picked up, like Bogdanovich or Burks. And I feel Trey Mann is ready to break out. One of those guys that's a pretty good player, but he's stuck behind a very talented Oklahoma City team. So I'm hoping he can get some minutes in Charlotte, and we can see what he's made of here. The Mavericks, they made some moves to improve their roster, picking up Daniel Gafford from the Wizards. Wizards get Richaun Holmes in a 2024 first-round pick. Holmes was buried on that Mavs bench and never really lived up to the expectations. Gafford's an underrated big man. Protect the rim, get you some rebounds, just what the Mavs need more of. A little more toughness down low, too. The bigger Mavs move, in my opinion, was the acquisition of P.J. Washington from the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets got back Grant Williams, who just signed with the Mavs this offseason in a sign and trade, Seth Curry, and a 2027 first-round pick. You've heard me talking about P.J. Washington on these recaps and how he tied a career-high 43 points coming off the bench. A great pickup that's going to fit perfect with Kyrie and Luka. Kind of tough for Grant Williams. Well, like I said, I had that sign and trade to go to the Mavs, only to get traded months later, but that's business, right? I guess. The Suns, they didn't want to stand still. They got in on the action, a 3-team deal that had the Suns acquiring Royce O'Neal from the Nets and David Roddy from the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies received Chimezie Metu, Yuta Watanabe from the Suns, and a first-round pick. The Nets received Keita Bates-Diop and Jordan Goodwin, and the draft rights to Vanya Marinkovic from the Grizzlies. They also got 3 future second-round picks. O'Neal and Roddy are great complementary guys that should fit right in Phoenix. And as the deadline of the deadline was nearing, there were a few last-minute trades. The Celtics made a few different ones, sending Canadian Delano Banton, former Raptor, to the Trailblazers for a second-round pick. And the other one they did was sending a second-round pick to the Sixers for their sparingly used guard, Jaden Springer. But I liked what I saw of him. That might be a good pickup down the line. And there was another last trade before the deadline where Pacers acquired another Canadian, Corey Joseph, a second-round pick in cash from the Warriors, while the Warriors got a 2024 second-round pick. And then it was said the Pacers waived Joseph soon after. So then it was also announced that the Grizzlies waived Victor Oladipo, who they had just acquired in that Steven Adams trade back on February 1st. So yeah, kind of a bummer for him. I hope he can get back in the league. Injuries have really derailed his career. But that's the recap of the deadline, a recap within a recap, some real Inception shit there. What do you think of the moves? Like I said, no superstars per se, but some doozies. Like, I personally think the Thunder went in the wrong direction getting Hayward. Maybe he'll have a resurgence with this winning group and make me eat my words, but I feel like they could have got out a different vet. Like I said, one of the ones the Knicks got, and talking about the Knicks, I think they did great and they won the trade. The moves they've done this year really helped them out. They just need to get healthy. But yeah, a little curious about some of the moves the Sixers made. It'll be cool to see Buddy Hield on the floor with Embiid when he comes back from injuries, but nothing flashy about that Suns trade. But those guys will have big moments for them in the playoffs. And I really like the moves Dallas made to, getting 2 big men that play very different types of games, One more outside, one more inside, but 2 valuable pieces, I believe, for them going forward. Like I said, perfect pieces to play with Kyrie and Luka. And it'll be interesting to see who gets picked up. A lot of those wave players, like I said, Killian Hayes, Spencer Dinwiddie, Daniel House, Joe Harris, Corey Joseph, Korkmaz. Some good shooters on that list, some good wild cards that could impact the team. Now we're caught up on the deadline and all the trades. Let's recap what happened. Starting the Atlantic here, out east with the team with the best record still in the NBA, the Boston Celtics. They went 2-0 this past week, destroying an understaffed Grizzlies team and winning a tight one over the Hawks. Celtics have won 7 of their last 9, losing to only 2 LA teams along that stretch, and they're looking like the real deal. A lot of people are calling them out saying, oh, I don't know what they'll do in the playoffs. And I don't know what they've done to hurt that. You know, they had a few tough games at home, but it's a long season. And I think they still have the best starting lineup in the NBA. They have some tough matchups coming up leading into the All-Star break, playing the Heat, and then a home and home with the Nets. So I think they have potential to win all 3 of those games and go into the break feeling pretty good. Next in the division, you got the New York Knicks, 4th best record in the East. They went 1-2 this past week. They'd have a fourth quarter collapse against the Lakers at home, but they'd bounce back and thump the Grizzlies. Fortunately, Jalen Brunson would injure his ankle in that win, and then the following game, the Knicks would get beaten up by the Mavericks without Brunson in the lineup. So hopefully that ankle injury isn't too serious. They're already without Julius Randle and his shoulder injury, and OG Anunoby just had a procedure to remove bone fragments from the elbow. Does not sound very fun, but the Knicks have had some reinforcements coming through the trades. Dante DiVincenzo has been absolutely lights out, hitting it from everywhere. Hit 36 in that loss to the Mavs. He's stepped up big time. The Knicks look fantastic on paper, but we got to see them off the paper and onto the floor, hopefully sooner before later here. Schedule is doing the Knicks no favors. They play the Pacers, Rockets, and Magic before going into the All-Star break. Next up in the Atlantic, the Sixers, 5th best record now. They're kind of falling down in the standings. They went 0-3 this past week on a 3-game losing streak. Losers of 7 of their last 8, losing by double digits to the Mets, Mavs, and Warriors this past week. And that wasn't even the worst news. Potential MVP candidate Joel Embiid underwent surgery to repair an injury to his meniscus in his left knee. Said he'll be reevaluated in 4 weeks, and there's no timetable for his return, so he'll definitely not play 65 games this season, so that takes him out of any individual accolades. A real bummer for him, but on the team level, it's a bigger bummer as the Sixers are 4-12 without him in the lineup, and this losing streak could continue going into the All-Star game, but the addition of Buddy Hield is nice. We'll see what they can do to get him going on the team. Next in the division, we'll go back to New York. We'll go to Brooklyn. We'll go with the Nets. They went 1-3 this past week. They beat an Embiid-less Sixers team by double digits, but then they lose 3 straight by double digits, losing at home to the Warriors, Mavericks, and Cavs. Granted, those are some tough, stiff competition to face, you know. The Nets didn't really look too threatening in any of those games, though, and they have been bringing Ben Simmons back into the lineup after his lengthy absence, trying to get that figured out. And it seems like they had enough in the mediocre play of Spencer Dinwiddie as they traded him to the Raptors just to get waived. But coming back in return, they got Dennis Schroeder and Thad Young. And I don't know, Dennis Schroeder, that's a very popular position with the Nets. We'll see how many minutes he gets there. And Lonnie Walker was getting some pretty good time, but he's been dealing with some hamstring injuries. But it seems when he's on the court, they seem to play better. So hopefully the Lonnie Walker fourth can get back on there. We'll wrap up the Atlantic Division, going to Toronto. They went 1-3 this past week. Raptors were just blown out by the Rockets in Houston. And they bounced back. Looked like they were going to shock the Thunder, but a huge second half collapse led to this game needing 2 overtime periods, and the Thunder would prevail. The Raptors would then get blown out by the Pelicans by 38 in New Orleans before finally breaking this losing streak and beating the Hornets in Charlotte. The Raptors have been dealing with RJ and IQ coming in and out of the lineup, but they've had Jakob Poeltl return from injury, and the team seems to play better having him in the middle there. So hopefully these guys can get on the floor and stay healthy. A lot of people thought Bruce Brown was going to get moved at the deadline, but he's sticking with the Raptors here. It was interesting to see them move Dennis Schroeder, after signing the German this past offseason, but the acquisition of Emmanuel Quickley, they're like, we got our new point guard later. I thought Dinwiddie was, like I said, a good fit there, or even another piece of a trade, so it was surprising just to see him get waived. And the plan on bringing all the Canadians home is really coming to fruition as Kelly Olynyk joins RJ and Chris Boucher in the Ontario capital. I know Otto Porter Jr. was a bus in TO and he needed to GO, but throwing the first round pick in there was surprising. I always like watching Olynyk play, so for me on a personal level, I like it. And maybe we'll finally get to see Ochai Agbaji come out, maybe his come out party. I've always liked him coming out of Kansas, and maybe this new scenery will be just what he needs. Maybe the Raptors could sneak into that play-in game. The bottom of that East isn't very crazy right now, but I had to have a look at some of the names the Raptors had at the beginning of the season. You know, Precious Achua, OG, Pascal Siakam, Malachi Flynn, Koloko, Porto Jr., Schroeder, Thaddeus, all gone. I'm excited to see what Masai has planned for this team, and I hope they get hot. And like I said, bring some excitement to it. Otherwise, it's a very disappointing season. We leave the Atlantic and go to the Central Division, starting with the division leaders and one of the hottest, if not the hottest teams in the NBA, Cleveland Cavaliers. They went 4-0 this past week, beating the Spurs, blowing the Kings out for beating the Wizards and Nets. This team has won 8 in a row, 16 of their last 17 games. Yeah, you heard that right. They moved up to second in the Eastern Conference, and they're getting healthy now, too. They were doing a lot of this without all their healthy guys, but they're coming back. Donovan Mitchell has entered the MVP chat. He's putting up huge numbers on this winning team, and this team's defense legit. Second best in the NBA by ratings and points allowed. Jared Allen's been doing it all season, and now his partner in crime, Evan Mobley's back, and this team is one of the best front courts in the league, if not the best, especially defensively. Cleveland has not looked as good since LeBron left town, so I hope they can continue this. No injuries. Next up in the division is probably the team most picked to win the Central Division, including myself, the Milwaukee Bucks. They went 1-3 this past week, beating the Mavs in Dallas to give Doc Rivers his first win at the helm. Then they'd lose on the road to the Jazz and Suns before returning home and losing the Timberwolves in Rivers' home debut. So things haven't looked since Doc took over for the fired Adrian Griffin. Rivers is now 1-5 since taking over. Granted, the Timberwolves game was the first one at home with Rivers leading, and he already pointed out the schedule makers for the road trip where they were on. Not good to make excuses already, but people are saying the vibes are good in Milwaukee, you know, after they are instituting some of Doc's ways. But, you know, vibes don't always equal wins, so for the All-Star break, the Bucks have 2 very winnable games coming up against the Hornets and Grizzlies and 2 tough matchups against the Nuggets and Heat. So we'll see a nice barometer here for this team and what Doc can institute. You know, he'll be coaching in the All-Star game. You got to feel for Adrian Griffin. He was fired with that record he had, and Doc Rivers is getting this praise despite his team starting 1-5. Ain't that a B? From Milwaukee to Indiana, Pacers went 2-2 this past week. They dropped a game to the Kings where they brought Halliburton off the bench as part of his rehabilitation from his hamstring injury. He continued to play limited minutes over the next few games. They beat up on the Hornets before winning a close one at the Rockets, where there was some trash talk between Halliburton and Dillon Brooks. Then they'd get blown out by the Warriors, where there was an on-fire Steph Curry in that one. This Pacers team still trying to get Pascal Siakam situated with the squad, and this team is deep, you know? But they'll only go as far as their leader, Tyrese Halliburton, will take them. And I think that's why they're tackling this hamstring injury so aggressively with the minutes restriction. And hopefully he can play big minutes again, because that's really when they start winning, right? And we'll see how much he participates in All-Star Weekend, in which he'll be starting. I think Doug McDermott will be a nice switch off for Buddy Hield. He's obviously not, I don't think he's as good a shooter in the league as Buddy Hield. If you look at some of Buddy Hield's numbers, he shoots and hits a lot of threes. So this will open up some time, though, for Canadians Benedict Mathurin and Andrew Nembhard to get some time and, you know, see what they can do with the extra minutes. Next up in the Central, Chicago Bulls. They went 2-1 this past week, losing to the Kings before bouncing back and coming back to beat the Timberwolves in overtime. Then they beat the Grizzlies in Memphis. And most surprising about the Bulls was probably the lack of movement by them at the deadline. A lot of people figured the Bulls would make some moves, you know, either DeMar or Caruso. I thought, you know, before the injury, Zach LaVine had a good shot at getting traded. But once he was announced he was done for the year, they were really kind of limited what the Bulls could do. So they're rolling with what they got, which is good. If you're not going to get an offer you want, don't take it, right? They're 2 games below 500, clinging to a play-in spot, and I think they have enough to shock people. The improvement of Kobe White has been something else. I'll talk about more on him in my most improved player talk. Billy Donovan's starting to play Vucevic and Drummond more. They both started together to match up with the Timberwolves and their big front line, and that mentality kind of carried over into the next game against the Grizzlies. I hope they keep rocking that big lineup, and that big group with DeMar, Kobe, Ao, and Alex Caruso. This they could surprise people. I'm glad they're rolling with it because you don't want to settle for something that isn't there. Wrapping up in this division, we go to Detroit. Yeah, the Pistons went 2-2 this past week, dropping 2 straight at home against the Clippers and Magic. They bounced back by heading out west and surprising the Kings. Then they take the Trailblazers to overtime and beat them in the extra period, just hours after making all kinds of roster changes. So yeah, the Pistons, 2-game winning streak. First time we've said that since week 1 of the NBA season. And yeah, we're in week 15 now, so it's been a while. But big wins, shout-outs, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren. Ivey's putting up huge scoring numbers, and Jalen Duren's been a beast. 27 points and 22 boards in that win over Portland. And I got to, give credit to Cade Cunningham. I was speaking up about how the Pistons play without him in the lineup, but the former number 1 overall pick against the Blazers showed, hey, don't forget about me. I can fit in here. It's the other pieces that need to go. And maybe with this shakeup in the lineup, they might be finding their group here. And I noticed the wins are coming with Marcus Sasser on the floor, the prolific shooting rookie. He kind of got lost in the shuffle throughout the season, and maybe I hyped him up a little soon. I had to go back and check the tape, but I was saying, hey, maybe he can steal some 6 Man of the Year votes back in week 2 on November 9th. So maybe they forgot about him a bit since then, but he's been playing more. I like to see it. Maybe they can snag some more wins for the All-Star break. They face the Clippers, Lakers, and Suns. So that's asking a bit, but hey, when you're young and wild like that, sky's the limit. We'll go to the last division in the Eastern Conference here, the Southeast. We have a tie at the top of the division between the Heat and Magic. We'll start with the Heat. They went 3-1 this past week, beating the Wizards before losing to the Clippers, but they bounced back, throttling the Magic and then beating the Spurs. This team had a nice week after getting over that lengthy losing streak. They've been flexing depth lately. Terry Rozier's still finding his way. Jimmy Butler's really stepped his game up, kind of doing a little bit of everything. And Bam, he's showing he's deserving of that All-Star nod. And this Miami Heat, they're just like a dangerous, wounded animal. They kind of lurk there, and you think they're dead, and then boom, suddenly you're dead. We'll see if the Heat can keep their 2-game winning streak going, as they have some tough matchups against the Celtics, Bucks, and Sixers before we pause for the All-Star break. The other Florida squad, the Orlando Magic, went 3-1 this past week as well. They went on the road, beat Minnesota and Detroit. They then lose to Miami that I just mentioned before bouncing back and beating my Spurs in a game that had all kinds of wild highlights, mostly at the expense of Victor Wembanyama. He had a dunk where he thought he had it, and Jonathan Isaac, no, got it out of there. Then there was a facial by Mo Wagner where he threw it down on the big Frenchman. The crowd was losing it, Ever since the return of Mo's bro, Franz Wagner, from injury, this team's kind of been rejuvenated and looking like the team we saw earlier in the season. Franz takes pressure off All-Star Paulo Banchero, who takes pressure off Wagner. The two play great off each other. As long as those dudes stay on the floor, the Magic should pick up more wins. They have tough games against the Bulls, Thunder, and Knicks before the All-Star break, but it'll be interesting to see which Florida team's leading the Southeast going into the break. On to Atlanta. The Hawks went 2-2 this past week. They won a thrilling game at home over the Suns, an even more thrilling OT home win over the Warriors. They kept the excitement going, but lost a 149-144 shootout to the Clippers. They then would battle the Celtics, but they'd have no answer for Porzingis in that one and lose it. And Trae Young, he's turned it up since being a snub for the All-Star game. He was already having a good season, but he kind of has been giving everyone a big fuck you for not putting him in the game. Justifyingly, though, he was announced as an alternate for either the injured Joel Embiid or Julius Randle. Oh man, I skipped that in the Raptors portion. Scotty Barnes was the other alternate mentioned, as well as Trae Young. But anyway, there's been some good play coming from other Hawks players. Jalen Johnson, you'll hear more about him in the most improved player conversation we'll get to later. It's got to be between him and Kobe White. But anyway, Onyeka Okongwu, he's really played big lately. And DeJounte Murray, everyone thought he was getting moved. I thought he was getting moved, but he's sticking with the lineup. The Hawks are rolling the dice, and we'll see where this team can max out by the end of the season. Next in the Southeast, Charlotte Hornets. They went 0-4 this past week and owned the longest losing streak in the league at 9. They were thumped by the Thunder and Pacers, then lost some close ones to the Lakers and Raptors. This whole team was really shaken up at the deadline. Great bench players, P.J. Washington, Gordon Hayward, both shipped out of town. All-star LaMelo Ball, he's missed 7 straight, probably 8 straight. He's probably missing the game coming up against the Bucks. His absence has been huge. Miles Bridges has been trying to put the team on his back-to-back 40-point games, including a career-high 45 against the Raptors. Brandon Miller is showing he's deserved of that high draft pick with how he's been playing lately. The addition of Grant Williams could be good for this young team that doesn't defend very well. And getting a shooter like Seth Curry, that's pretty big too, you know? And he'll be playing in front of his dad, Del Curry. He covers games for the Hornets. They're from Charlotte. That should be pretty cool. And the sneaky addition in all these moves with the addition of Trey Mann. I feel like this dude's about to explode as a Hornet, like a B-drill, if you would. You know, he is. I've always wondered why he's getting traded, but he was so buried on that Oklahoma City Thunder team. They're so deep, so young. I don't think he was ever going to get time. So this could be the chance, the Trey Mann show. It's like the Truman Show, but a little different. Miles Bridges, he declined any chance of being traded, said he wants to stay in Charlotte. So let's just get this team healthy and see what we got. This was some interesting dice to roll. I don't even know how many sided dice this is, but let's roll it. Wrap up the Eastern Conference. We go to the Washington Wizards. They went 0-3 this past week on a 4-game losing streak, and they lost to the Heat, got blown out by the Suns, and Bradley Beals returned to town, and then lost a close one to a tough Cavs team. They did suffer a bit of a loss, losing Daniel Gafford to the Mavericks, but that'll open up some more playing time for Marvin Bagley Jr. once he returns from injury. Also, he was playing pretty well before the injury, sorry. Sean Holmes, maybe he can regain some of his play that earned him that huge contract he signed that keeps getting him traded. He definitely regressed after signing it, and that's why he's not in Sacramento or Dallas anymore. And the Wizards decided to keep Kyle Kuzma, Jordan Poole, keeping them both on the roster. You know, this team has been really disappointing, and the Pistons' recent string of wins, they could pass the Wizards in the standings, and the Wizards would be in the basement of the conference. We're going to head out west, go to the Northwest Division leading and Western Conference leading Minnesota Timberwolves. Although the top seed has changed a few times since last episode, the Wolves currently hold it by a wolf hair. Timberwolves they went 2-2 this past week, losing a tough one to the Magic at home. They bounced back, beating the Rockets, but then the Timberwolves would give up a 20-point second half lead and lose to the Bulls in overtime. An angry Wolves team would then go into Milwaukee and take that loss out on the Bucks, winning by 25. This team is still number 1 in the West for a reason. Anthony Edwards leads his team the right way with just the right amount of swag. And this team is the number 1 defensive team in the NBA. When you play consistently good defense, you are in every game. And their move didn't really cause a lot of buzz, but Monte Morris, that addition, really adds some maturity to a team that lacks it at times. That'll really come in handy in the playoffs. You need someone with that calming demeanor. Next up in the division and the conference is the defending champion Denver Nuggets. They went 3-0 this past week, beating the Trailblazers in back-to-back games before spoiling a big night in LA and beating the Lakers. Nuggets were challenged a bit by the Blazers, but the champs really took care of them without much of a threat. They then went big on the Lakers before the Lakers went on a big comeback to make it interesting, but the Nuggets down the stretch, Jokic and Murray, what a 1-2 punch that is, you know? Like, another all-star snub for Murray. It just seems to inspire him even more. This team, they look like they could win back-to-back titles, and it really showed down the stretch against the Lakers. You had Murray making big plays. That double team read by Jokic where Reeves went in to get the steal, and I don't know how Jokic knew he was coming, but he just turned, boom, hit Porter Jr. in the corner, blouses right there. It's phenomenal what that guy can do on the floor. But sounding like a skipping CD here. Next up in the division and the conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder. They went 2-1 this past week, winning back-to-back games without J-Dub, Jalen Williams. They beat the Hornets and needed a huge comeback I alluded to earlier to win in double overtime against the Raptors. Then the Thunder at J-Dub returned to the lineup, but only he, SGA, and Holmgren showed up to play against the Jazz, it seemed, as the Jazz took that one. Thunder felt they needed veteran leadership and went out and got it in the shape of Gordon Hayward. I think he'll have a good bench scoring punch, and, he'll lead these guys with experience. He's been around. But I feel the Thunder, I don't want to beat this horse. I feel like they could have got a better vet out there. No offense, I'm not on a Gordon Hayward hate train, but I feel like I kind of am right now. I just feel like they could have brought someone else in there. Maybe he'll make me eat my words. They have a great team. He shouldn't be asked to do much, but we'll see what they can do. They have some tough tests before the All-Star break, taking on the Mavericks, Kings, and Magic before the break, but we'll see what happens here. Next up in the division, the Utah Jazz. They went 2-1 this past week, beating up on the Bucks, and they won a tight one over the Thunder. They then went in the desert and lost to the Suns. Lauri Markkanen's playing like an all-star. I praise the play of Colin Sexton and how much better this team is with him in the lineup and six-man specialist Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench. Plus, Walker Kessler off the bench. His numbers are stupid. What he's doing off the bench with the minutes he plays, it's crazy. We'll get more to that later. But I hate how they got rid of Simone Fontecchio. I like the Italian, how he fit on this team. He was starting a lot of games for him. I hope he can continue that in Detroit, as well as Kelly Olynyk. That's a loss of leadership. But new acquisition, Kevin Knox. He's one of those guys that's shown flashes. Maybe Utah's where he'll blossom. Also, Otto Porter Jr., like I mentioned, did not work in Toronto, but he's been a good shooter on a title-winning team. Maybe he'll have a resurgence in Utah. The Jazz take on Warriors, Lakers, Warriors again before the All-Star break, and they're in the last play-in spot right now. I hope this team can do something, get in some of that postseason fun. We'll wrap up the Northwest by going to Portland. The Trailblazers went 0-3 this past week, losing back-to-back games against the defending champions. They then lost a tough one to Detroit that I mentioned earlier. A game that the Blazers looked to have wrapped up, but blew a big lead for the Pistons to come and steal it. Extra buzzkill for Jeremy Grant, who put up a career-high 49 points in the loss. And this team, they've taken some lumps and lost some tough ones, but Scoot Henderson, he's looking more the guy that we thought with the number 3 overall pick, not that guy struggling in early in the year. But think a lot of these guys going through like the G League on those Ignite teams, they're a lot different than playing collegiate ball, and you can see it when some of these guys come into the league right away. Well, I'll get to Jalen Green more in Houston. Some of these guys are late bloomers in the NBA, it seems, at times, but maybe it's where they're coming from out of the G League. I don't know. We'll get more on that. We'll leave the Northwest. We'll go to the Pacific, starting with the division-leading Los Angeles Clippers. That's right. This team had the number 1 spot earlier in the week, but there's been some shuffling between them, Minnesota, Denver, OKC. They seem to be in a little bit of a tier above the rest in the league right now. Clippers went 3-1 this past week, winning a close game over the Pistons, Heat, and Hawks before returning home and losing to an inspired Pelicans team. This team has won 17 of their last 21 and looked like one of the best teams in the league. Said it before, and I'll probably keep repeating it. Looks like they've got it figured out. The guys on this team know their roles, and they're excelling in those roles. This fine-tuned machine can really beat anyone in the league. They got the depth. They got the stars. They need to they defend when they need to. Kawhi Leonard could have his name more in the MVP race, but his teammates are playing so damn good lately that kind of takes away from him. It's a good problem to have, and I don't think Kawhi Leonard's worried about, am I going to win the MVP? This team is thinking title. There's a lot of guys on this team that have fucking great resumes but are missing that NBA championship. So that's what they're thinking. The biggest thing on this team is stay healthy. Please, let's let them stay healthy and see what they can do. They got some games against the T-Wolves and Warriors for the All-Star break, and a game against the Pistons as well, so we'll see what they can do going into the break here. Next up in that division, the Phoenix Suns. They went 3-1 this past week. They lost to an inspired Hawks team in ATL with a freshly snubbed Trae Young. They went into Washington, D.C., and former Wizard Bradley Beal dropped a season-high 43 against his old team. Suns then picked up back-to-back wins over the Bucks and Jazz, who have been pretty good teams. Clippers they've figured it out, and I think the Suns are getting closer to having things figured. Beal is starting to find his way within the big three. Yusuf Nurkic, if he can stay on the floor and if he continues to play like he will, that'll really help them up in the middle. And those sneaky moves they did at the deadline, bringing Royce O'Neal and Roddy in from the Grizzlies, great role players, and every team needs those kind of role players. They gave up Watanabe and Metu, but they weren't really impacting the team much anyhow. The Suns take on the Warriors, Kings, and Pistons for the All-Star break, so we'll see where they lie going in there. Back to Cali, we go to the state capital. Sacramento Kings went 2-2 this past week, beating the Pacers and Bulls on the road. They then get blown out by the Cavs in Cleveland before returning home and getting stunned by the Pistons. Yeah, the Pistons. Sabonis has put up 2 triple-doubles in the last 4 games there, and he's getting in some talk about some MVP votes. Yet he's not an all-star. That's something, eh? The team's lacking consistency at the moment. They look great in those wins over Indiana and Chicago and look like shells of themselves against the Cavs and Pistons. That kind of inconsistent play won't get you very far in the playoffs. The Kings they squeeze 4 more games in before the All-Star break, taking on the Nuggets before they go on the road to play OKC, Phoenix, and Denver. So maybe it's a good thing their main guys didn't get named to the All-Star game, so that they can get a nice break and try to get reignited going into the second part of the season. We'll go from Sacramento back to LA. The Lakers went 2-1 this past week, picking up back-to-back wins over the Knicks and Hornets for losing that game to the Nuggets I mentioned. And there was some history in that game to the Nuggets. The day was the February 8th, 2024, which is symbolic for Gigi Bryant's number 2, Kobe Bryant, who wore 8 and 24. The Lakers unveiled Kobe Bryant's statue. It looks awesome. It was the moment after his 81-point game against the Raptors where he's pointing to the sky, rocking the number 8 jersey with a sleeve on his knee, a bandage on his finger, a true look for a legend. There's 5 Larry O'Brien trophies around him, symbolizing how many titles he won with the Lakers. Kobe's widow, Vanessa Bryant, gave a great little speech there and saying, for the record, Kobe picked this pose you're about to see, so if anyone has issues with it, tough shit. And it said that there will be 2 more Kobe statues, one with him and his number 24 and one with him and his daughter Gianna. So it's a very historic moment for one of the best to lace him up. A lot of big names were in attendance there. So it's a really cool statue. Hopefully I get to see it one day. Everyone was saying the Lakers would make a move at the deadline, and they decided to stick it out with the guys they have, I guess. They didn't find the right move they wanted, and this team's very capable. Before the season started, I said, hey, they're going to the finals. Maybe that was a bit of a stretch, but the talent's still there. It's step up or shut up for a lot of these Lakers. AD and LeBron's been pretty consistent, but the other guys, at different times, we need it to be every time now if this team wants to win a title. They face the Pelicans, Pistons, and Jazz for the break, and we'll really be judging on how they come out of the break. We know AD and LeBron will be ready to go. Will everybody else? Wrapping up the Pacific, we go to the Golden State Warriors. They went 4-1 this past week, which very well it could have been 5-0. They beat up on the Grizzlies before losing that thrilling OT game I mentioned earlier to the Hawks. They'd then rip off 3 straight wins, beating the Nets, Sixers, and Pacers. That win over the Nets was a little interesting, as Klay Thompson was benched the entire fourth quarter. He obviously wasn't thrilled about it, but the team won, and that's what matters. Steph Curry's been cranking it up lately too, dropping a season-high 11 three-pointers in that big win over the Pacers. I think Jonathan Kuminga has been really the game changer here. He's turned his game up, maybe trying to enter that MIP talk. Another cool thing has been the increased playing time of Lester Quinones. If you watch my other podcast, Sports and Shorts of Sorts, I was hyping him up this summer in Summer League, so it's cool to see him get some time. Better late than never. The team's really kind of come together with Draymond Green coming back and them getting over that tragic loss of their assistant coach, Decky. This team, they're coming together, and you do not want to play a dangerous Warriors team. They play the Jazz twice with a Clippers game in between before going into the break. Leaves us in the Southwest here, starting with division leaders New Orleans Pelicans, 6th best record in the West. They went 3-0 this past week as they rock a 4-game winning streak. They won a close one against the Spurs with Zion Williamson making a clutch go-ahead basket that ended up being the game winner. The Pelicans then destroyed the Raptors before going into LA and ending a Clippers 4-game winning streak. Head coach Willie Green has switched things up a bit, tried rolling with Point Zion, using the big superstar as a focal point, drawing people away from those prolific shooters that the Pelicans have. I know you usually want Zion finishing, at the rim, as he's a beast, but having him create for everyone else seems to be working pretty well right now. We'll see how long this experiment continues, but the results are looking pretty good right now. Pels have an easier schedule going into the break, taking on the Blazers, Grizzlies, and Wizards. So they should have a 7-game winning streak going into the break. But this is where complacency sets in on this team, and they could drop one, even all these games. So we'll see. Hopefully they hold up and win, and they keep a nice little streak going into the break because they're very more than capable. Next up in the division, the Mavericks. They went 3-1 this past week. First losing to Milwaukee at home. The Mavs would then have Kyrie Irving return to the lineup. They'd pull off 3 straight wins, beating an Embiid-less Sixers team, then the Nets, and then the Knicks in New York. A lot of people still question whether Kyrie and Luka can play together. I think enough of that. Over these last 3 wins, they've showed they can, They can play off the ball. Yes, they're ball dominant guys. That's when they're at their best, but they're pretty damn good off the ball too. They're high IQ guys. They can get it done. What they really need is the others, and the others have stepped up a bit lately, especially Josh Green. That monster dunk in Madison Square Garden, in Madison Square Garden was huge. And with Kyrie back in the lineup, that puts Tim Hardaway Jr. back to the bench, puts him back in his 6-man role where I think he's his best. And the Mavs made some big moves, like I alluded to. Grant Williams, was rubbing people the wrong way in Dallas. I don't know, that's an odd quote as you let someone go. But he was shipped off with Seth Curry to Charlotte. But what I like with the Mavs coming back, and which is probably going to propel them up the standings, PJ Washington, underrated player. Kind of not talked about a bunch in Charlotte. But like I said, I mentioned his 43 points off the bench early in the season. Huge pickup. And the addition of Gafford's big too, a little more toughness in size. He'll show Derek Lively, the rookie, a few vet tricks. I think those are great moves that are gonna, the 2 big guys that play very different. Like I said, Gafford's more inside, PJ Washington's more outside. But the one common theme those guys share is that they're gonna make this Dallas team better. Sticking in Texas, we'll go to the Houston Rockets. Houston's went 1-2 this past week, beat the Raptors by 29 in Houston. They then go on the road and lose to the Timberwolves and a close one to the Pacers. And things that don't get easier is veteran point guard Fred VanVleet has a left adductor strain. Keep him out a few weeks. Bigger Buzz Killington is going to keep him out of the return to Toronto, where he won a title with the Raptors. But the Rockets play the Raptors, Hawks, Knicks, and Grizzlies going into the break. And I guess one positive with VanVleet out is more minutes available for rookies Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore, helping these guys develop on the fly as they still try to get into that play-in spot. We'll go from Texas to Memphis. The Grizzlies went 0-4 this past week, owning the second longest losing streak in the NBA at 7 games, losing to the Warriors, Celtics, Knicks, and Bulls. And this team has been hit by the injury bug in the worst way. That loss against Boston, the Grizzlies only had 8 players available to play. 3 of them were on 2-way contracts, 3 of them on 10-day contracts. Although there have been a few changes from the roster already from that game. David Roddy has been shipped off. He's now in Phoenix. 2-way player Gigi Jackson was on a 2-way contract, but his great play lately has got him signed to a 4-year deal to keep him in Memphis. Good for him. Mentioned the Grizzlies, kind of lost a great player in Xavier Tillman. He's a reliable big in this league. Tough to see him go. He'll be great in Boston. But the guy they're getting back, Lamar Stevens, he's ready to break out. This could be a good time for him to get more minutes in Memphis. They replaced Tillman with Metu coming in from Phoenix. Watanabe should be a good veteran, help with the 3-point shooting as well. Another lefty there. With all the injuries Memphis has been going through, this is really just a showing out party this year, and they're all busting their ass every game, which you got to give a shout out to Taylor Jenkins. His job better not be in jeopardy. That's all I'm saying. We'll wrap up the team recap, go to my San Antonio Spurs, 0-4, 6-game losing streak. Lost that tough one to the Pelicans. I mentioned the clutch basket by Zion. Not so clutch by the Spurs on a possession to potentially win the game. Vassell has been feeling hot that game, and he pulled up for the 3 to try to win, but if you would have just looked in front of him, you had a rolling Wembanyama to the hoop. Just throw it up once, see what happens. But anyway, they lost that. They'd lose big to the Cavaliers, and they'd lose to the Heat and the Magic. I mentioned that night against the Magic wasn't so magical for Wemby, as he ended up on the bad end of highlights that did not go his way. We lost a good shooter in Dougie McBuckets. I hope he does well in Indiana, but that subtraction could open up some minutes more of the younger wing players on the team. I wonder if the Spurs would keep Marcus Morris. I mentioned him getting acquired earlier, if they'd waive him so he could join a contender. It's got to be tough for him playing at home in Philadelphia on a playoff team, getting sent to the last place team in the Western Conference. But his tough demeanor is kind of what the Spurs are lacking inside, and his influence on Wembanyama could really go a long way. But we'll see what happens. I'm not sure what the Spurs are going to do with him. The Spurs play the Nets, Raptors, and Mavericks before heading into the break, so lots of good stuff there. That's the team recaps, keeping y'all informed on the past week and what's yet to come. Speaking of what's yet to come, some quick All-Star announcements. We have our competitors for the AT&T Slam Dunk Contest. Boston, All-Star. You don't usually get All-Stars in the dunk contest anymore. Jaylen Brown. You have the Miami Heat star rookie Yami Jaquez Jr. Jacob Toppin, brother of Obi Toppin. He's on a two-way contract with the Knicks. Then you have last year's champion, Mac McClung. That should be a fun little group there. You have the three-point contest. This has kind of usurped the dunk contest the past few years. Past many years, I think, now. We have a star-studded affair. Last year's champ, Damian Lillard's back, this time in Milwaukee colors. He'll be going up against teammate Malik Beasley. Knicks, Jalen Brunson. Hopefully he's back from injury. Pacers, Tyrese Halliburton. I don't think you can have minutes restriction in that contest. Lauri Markkanen of the Jazz. Cleveland's Donovan Mitchell. Minnesota's Karl Anthony Towns. And Atlanta's Trae Young. Skills and celebrity all-star game rosters have been announced, but we'll preview all that. We'll make some predictions for the all-star game in next episode as it leads up. We'll have a quick gander at our stats leader. Like I said, that crushing injury to Joel Embiid kind of takes him out of the running for points per game leader. Hate to see that. Damn you, injuries. But in saying that, Dallas's Luka Doncic leads the league at 34.6 points per game. Oklahoma City, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Milwaukee's Giannis Antetokounmpo are tied at 31.1. Cleveland's Donovan Mitchell and Phoenix's Kevin Durant round out the top five. Our current rebounding leader comes out of Sacramento, not an all-star apparently. Domantas Sabonis leading the league with 13.1 per game. Behind him, a few guys averaging over 12 rebounds per game. Rudy Gobert of Minnesota, Denver's Nikola Jokic, Lakers' Anthony Davis, and a newcomer to the top five, Detroit's Jalen Duren. Good ups on him. I guess when you're getting over 20 rebounds in some games, it's going to move you up to Tyrese Halliburton. He's been hanging in there, playing with that minutes restriction. It's part of his injury rehabilitation, but he's still leading the league at 11.7 assists per game. Atlanta's Trae Young just behind him at 10.9. Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, and LA Clipper James Harden round out the top five. On the defensive side, OKC's SGA leads the league in steals at 2.2. Cavs' Donovan Mitchell just behind him at 1.9. You have Sacramento's De'Aaron Fox, Kawhi Leonard, and Portland's Matisse Thybulle rounding out the top five. Number one overall pick, San Antonio Spur, Victor Wembanyama, still leading the league in blocks at 3.1. And Walker Kessler, yes, Walker Kessler off the bench, second in the league in blocks with 2.8. He's playing 23.2 minutes per game, and he's second in the league in blocks. That is crazy to me. Milwaukee's Brook Lopez, OKC's rookie, Chet Holmgren, and Anthony Davis of the Lakers round out that top five. Bringing us to the Ren City top five. A little bit of change, but nothing too drastic. Still at number one, the Boston Celtics. Number two, Denver Nuggets. 3, Cleveland Cavaliers. 4, Minnesota Timberwolves. And 5, LA Clippers. So you know the Celtics still holding down that number one spot. They are still the team with the best record in the NBA, so I can't bump them. The next 4 are really interchangeable. The Nuggets have looked so good with that 1-2 punch of Jokic and Murray, and their others are more in tune than any others in the league. Can't ignore the Cavaliers anymore. Their 8-game winning streak, 16 of the last 17. This team, you know, saying it out loud makes me think they could be number 2 on this list. The Timberwolves, still best team in the West, yet I have them dropping 2 spots this week. That collapse against the Bulls did not help them. I keep the LA Clippers on this list, just barely over the Thunder, but the Clippers are looking really good. But the Thunder could be on there too. It's a very tough top 5 lately. That brings us to the MVP talk. Joel Embiid. Take the Sixers big man out of the conversation. That opens it up for some other guys. I think it's a tie right now. Yes, a 4-way tie. 4 people tied up. It doesn't sound very fun. But you got OKC's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Denver's Nikola Jokic, Boston's Jason Tatum, and Cleveland's Donovan Mitchell. I think you got Antetokounmpo and Luka Doncic in that mix, but they got to get a little more wins and move up the standings a bit more again. Anthony Edwards and Knicks' Jalen Brunson are in the mix, and I mentioned it earlier, Kawhi Leonard could be getting hurt in the voting just because the rest of his team is stepping it up that much better. And you can't say there's a four-way tie. That sounds ridiculous. So I have SGA leading by a sliver. Rookie of the year, I think it's a long neck and neck contest with OKC's Chet Holmgren and Spurs' Victor Wembanyama. They both got a lock on it. I just wonder who's it going to be. It's going to come down to someone opening a briefcase at the end and they're going to win. It's going to be the guy contributing on a winning team, or is it the guy carrying his team but a struggling team? The question is old as time, and it'll really have to be answered and decided on who gets this trophy. It's a shame for Charlotte's Brandon Miller. He's been balling lately. Detroit's rookie Asar Thompson and Marcus Sasser back in the mix. They've looked good. Yamayakas Jr., despite the Rozier addition, has still been getting some time in the crunch, but it's got to be one of those giants to win that contest. Coach of the year is just as popular as MVP talk. Doc Rivers. No, I'm kidding. The guy's 1-5 and newly acquired. We're not getting there. Just because he's coaching the All-Star game, we're not losing our minds here. I'm thinking it's a toss-up between Minnesota's Chris Finch, OKC's Mark Daigneault, Boston's Mazzulla, and Cleveland's JB Bickerstaff. Right now, I have the wild card Bickerstaff leading that group, with Cleveland withstanding their injuries and doing what they can to stay one of the best teams in the league. Most improved player award, same as last week, I think. Chicago's Kobe White and Atlanta's Jalen Johnson, my front runners. Nothing's changing that. My preseason pick, Benedict Mathurin on the Pacers, should be getting some more time after the Buddy Hield trade, but it's too far for him in the season to come back and win that award. Sixth man of the year could go a few different ways. The front runners are still Sacramento's Malik Monk, and with Kyrie Irving back in the lineup, Tim Hardaway can go back to doing his thing off the bench. And Utah's Jordan Clarkson and Cleveland's Karis LeVert are in that mix, but I think it's Monks right now. I think he's leading that race. And that's it. That's it, guys. 15 weeks we're into the season now. Awesome. We have the All-Star game just around the bend.